click the button to start?
I have. So it should be
Nice. So
live
we're
any
live.
moment now. Yes.
That's perfect. Welcome back to the Extraordinary Life series. It's me and Linda again. We're excited to have you after last week, where we did an episode of this about masculinity and femininity, and we got some questions about that, which revolved around the topic of authenticity. For some reason, our topic, went there, and we thought we're just going to get together again and talk about this topic. Some tools on how to be more authentic, and what it actually means to be authentic. And I'd like to start off right over there, because we've been talking about authenticity last time, and I think it's an easy word to just throw around. But what is it about? Um, what's your thoughts on that, Linda? What's authenticity to you?
I definitely agree that it's an easy word to throw around. And what does it mean really? And so my definition of authenticity is when you show up, are you showing up in the way that honors your boundaries, that honors your integrity, that honors your values, all of these different things? And what we're going to get into tonight, which I'm very excited about, is what does your authenticity look like and how do you know? Because it's one thing to say that you honor your boundaries and with yourself and others, but it's a lot about how do I do this? And so sometimes you're doing something, sometimes you're being something. And really, there's a ton of different tools, but it's more than just the tools, right? It's more about that way that you want to show up, and the tools are the things that you can use to leverage that once you know what they are.
Well, exactly. I think in the end, what authenticity comes down to is, well, most people. I've asked this question a lot of times. I've coached around this topic. I've talked to coaches about authenticity, and most often what they say is that authenticity is about you acting in accordance with your personal values, which great. I would say it's about you being truly in alignment with your true self, which kind of comes down to the same thing. But then the question, there's always a follow-up question to that. It's always like, okay, but then what does that mean to be in line with your true self? Or then, okay, yes, but then what are your values? And I think authenticity is the thing itself, what you're being. And the tools are just there for awareness so that you can be that way consciously instead of just operate on some kind of default. So, yeah, to a certain extent, the tools are definitely important, but the tools aren't that which makes you be authentic.
Yes. So, like, maybe we should give an example here. And so, one of the things that I'm thinking about is if you have a value that says that you are going to make sure that you put yourself first and that you prioritize your self-care or independent time to take care of yourself in whatever way that is, and somebody asks you, hey, can we meet over the weekend? Let's go out to a movie. And you're sitting there thinking, oh gosh, I just have this thing that I made with myself that I'm going to be going camping with my family.
Mm,
And so the person asks you to do that, and you're like, oh, it's your best friend. You really want to do that. And so you know that if you say no, that you have other plans, it's going to disappoint them. So you'd
mm,
say, sure, I'd love to go. And really, you
right.
haven't honored your plans, you haven't honored your commitment to yourself. And now you've done something that, yes, it makes your friend happy. And when you go, it probably, make you happy too. But you haven't honored your value and you haven't honored the commitment that you already had set with your family because you said yes to something else.
Right. And I think a lot of people do that. And the problem here is that they're just not aware of that value enough. I think that it's very easy to, what it's actually about is being aware of your values and then creating a boundary around that so that you could hold that value. And if you're not aware of the value, you can't create the boundary. And let's say you are aware of the value, but you don't have any clue on how to set boundaries, it's also still going to go wrong. So I think that when we look at authenticity, it's very interesting to look at the tools that could help you set better values or become aware of your values and also create better boundaries. Um, what tool do you use to become more aware of your values or help your clients become aware of their values?
Okay, so there's one that's kind of a multi-level tool. So when that question comes up, let's say your friend asks you if you can do something, you need to be thinking, oh, am I prepared to go do this? Or I need to say that I'd love to go to the camping or the movies with you, but I already made plans to go camping with my family. So, what you're doing is you're slowing down to see if one, am I honoring my value, which is to spend family time first? And so, okay, yes, I'm going to honor it. And this is how I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to put it out to my friend in the way that I would love to go. However, we'll have to go another time because I have plans with my family this weekend. And so it's asking, what is my value? Am I going to honor it? And then how can I communicate that boundary to honor my value to my person that's asking me if I can go do something with them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I can relate to that. I remember a video I once recorded about how to say no in a better way, and there's this little formula that I use, and it's kind of similar to what you just shared right now. Um, One thing that I always think is interesting is that whenever people ask me, okay, but then how do I know what my values are? Um, I think deep down we always already know. Like we know, you can feel it when you're not acting in accordance with your values. Same way you can also feel it when you are. And when you are um, acting from that aligned space with your true authenticity, that feels exciting. It feels fulfilling. It lights you up. It feels good. And the moment where you're not, it can feel draining. It can feel a bit dreadful. You can feel low on energy. And well, I do believe that that's just you trying to help yourself. Follow that feeling of excitement, and you'll be acting in authentic alignment with yourself. And pay attention to when you don't feel that and when you feel the opposite, and then maybe ask yourself, um, what's going on here? What do I truly value? Because also those moments that you don't prefer do teach you about what you do prefer. And I think that, well, one of the ways that I help clients or I've helped clients who really are in that deep hole in terms of values and everything, and they feel like nothing in their lives in alignment, we take a look at everything that is going wrong and kind of zoom in on that and see, okay, so that means that that's what you don't prefer. And by figuring out what you don't prefer, you'll realize what you do prefer as well. And I think that's an interesting one.
And so what I'm hearing, and I agree with you, is that when we listen to how we're feeling, both in our mindset and how we're feeling in our body, it's going to give us a cue. And so if we listen to the cue, we're going to know whether or not something is giving us energy or taking from it, if it's something
Exactly.
that's we're excited about or something that we're dreading. And so this leads me to one of the other tools. So, okay, so let's say you're not as comfortable uh, I guess, communicating your boundaries and you haven't been really listening to your body cues. You've been kind of ignoring them because you're afraid to really say what needs to be said in a lot of occasions, let's say. And so that would be when where you really want to say no rather than saying yes. And you can feel it in your body. And you can know in your mind that, oh, I really don't want to do this, but if I say something, I'm going to lose my friend. Um, well, one of the best things that I think you can do is, and I believe in practice, right? So if you can find someone safe to practice, so they could say to you, hey, I would love to have you go with me on a trip to Europe in April. Will you come with me? And then your job and your role is to communicate why you can't go with your friend. So use a realistic example and then practice what you would say and then get the reflective feedback on how they received your message, your boundary, your communication, and then they could also share with you maybe where you could improve. If and so maybe you weren't able to say you couldn't go, and you hemmed and hawed about it and said yes instead of saying no. Well, then your partner could say, I know you wanted to say no here. Why didn't you follow through and communicate that? And then, and so that's a great way to do it, because when the stakes are high, or in the moment where you may or may not say the right thing, because you're just gonna like just say what needs to be said quickly to either escape the situation by avoiding it, or by not saying the right thing because you're too afraid. So practicing when it's someone safe, you're not afraid or worried about what's going to happen, then when you get into a situation where the stakes could feel higher, you're able to move right in and do it with confidence. And I will tell you, after you've done this a few times, where you normally struggled in the past with communicating your boundaries and what you really want, you get real good at it, and then you get confident. And then when you're confident in yourself, well, then you can be that authentic person that you want to be, and not be this other person that's the liked one or the agreeable one.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that there's so much to be had and gained from practicing setting your boundaries and acting in accordance with your values, especially in those safe environments. And yeah, that's where a partner is a great tool. Um, and at the same time, then it's very much about like the moment that you do have that awareness of your values, you use that tool of just feeling about it, and you found yourself a safe space or place to practice that in. It's also about being aware of what your boundaries actually are, because I think it's one thing to know your values and another to actually realize what boundaries are. And I think that a lot of people get it wrong, where they feel like boundaries are about really like hard rules of like, this is what I want until here and no further, that type of things. And what's actually funny is that that's not at all what a boundary is. It could be, it could look like that, but it's got nothing to do with the actual boundary. For a boundary, for example, for me, could be that I enjoy a glass of red wine. That is enough of a boundary. Like that's that, regardless of what you think, regardless of what anyone else thinks about me or about red wine or about me liking red wine, won't change that part of my personality. It's like, this is where my personality goes. That's the boundary of my person. I like red wine, and in that sense, there's so much more things that I prefer, or my opinions, or all these things, and just expressing those. That's a boundary. Um, what an unhealthy boundary would look like is if you were to tell me that you hate people who like red wine, and then I would be like, oh well, I don't like it that much. Do you know what I mean? And that's how simple boundaries could be. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand that, and also think that if I like red wine, that means you have to like red wine, and you have to like me because I like red wine. And it's got nothing to do with that. And I feel like it helps to think about boundaries in that way, because it will teach you or make you aware of where you might go wrong. Am I expressing this boundary because then I hope for you to tell me that you also like red wine? Because then it's not an authentic boundary anymore, because then there's this hidden agenda behind it. Or am I simply expressing my boundary because that's my truth and that's what I stand for and that's how I like to express myself and that's who I am because I've learned what my values are, which is, for example, honesty, and yeah, and enjoying life, right? Good glass of red wine. Um, so yeah, I definitely think that this awareness of your values plus that awareness of your boundaries plus a safe space to practice that in, and to, yeah, to, like you said, practice in a place where the stakes aren't as high. So then when the stakes are higher, you're ready. That's important. Yeah. As well as, well, it's all about honesty, right? It's all about this honesty. And the more you know yourself, the more honest you can be and show up. And I think that's one of the most underappreciated things, honesty. But I do think it's one of the most important ones, when you do it right.
I really appreciate you going into detail about what a boundary is and what it's not. And so the example where you share a boundary and you're expecting the other person to agree with you, that's not a boundary.
Right.
That was a great example. I also think that when you're communicating boundaries, a lot of times I think people like to think that they're absolutes, or they're putting up a wall because they don't want something. And so they'll say, well, I am never going to take phone calls on Thursday nights at 8 because I need to be focused on my meditation, let's say.
It's
And
meditation. Yeah.
so and so putting that out there like that, eh, or because I do know that sometimes people will say my boundary is, it's like, when you communicate your boundaries, you don't need to say my boundary is. You just say what your preference is or what you need from somebody. You just state what it is, and it's not a all or nothing black and white thing that you're communicating. So that's where I think that boundary setting can go wrong, and why boundaries sometimes get a bad name. I used to think for a very long time that boundaries were to keep people from not doing
Hmm.
it to you. And like, no,
Yeah.
boundaries are to honor you, your wishes, your preferences, your what you need. That's what they're for.
Yeah. What I like about that is that indeed, that's it's so important how you set a boundary, and that again comes back to what your value is about. And like I talk about this in my course, how your values, there's two different forms in which they come. You have preferences and you have non-negotiables, and it's very much about becoming aware of whether your value is a preference or simply a non-negotiable. And for example, this whole meditation thing. Let's say you really value that time for yourself on Thursday evening. You want to have an hour to meditate, so no phone calls. Is this time for yourself? Is that a preference or is that a non-negotiable? The difference here would be if it's a preference, you would be able to still change it around. It could also be Friday night. It could also be Wednesday night. It's important. Yes, I'm aware that I value this. However, if there's anything else that might be more important that could come up, or if there's anyone who would absolutely get, outraged by me doing that on my Thursday night, then I'm willing to, still make it a Wednesday or a Friday as long as it's there. On the other end, if it's non-negotiable, then that means that regardless of whatever is going on, this is what's going to happen. This would be my Thursday night because that's how much I value it. Now, I mean, I think, yeah, no, it's personal. I wanted to say, I think that with this example, no one would make that a non-negotiable, but it could be if you
They
really
could,
have
they could,
trouble. Yeah,
they could say that's their protected time, that they do a lot of different things for other people out of responsibilities that they have to carry, or commitments they have to keep. So they're going to say that this is my 1 hour and I don't schedule anything on that because that is the time I have for myself. Because if I don't do that, then I can't be in all these other places and spaces because I don't have the capacity or energy to show up at present. So a person could
yeah,
have that
good
as a
point.
non-negotiable. They totally could.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And I think that the moment you have that awareness of, okay, is this a preference or a non-negotiable? That's when it becomes a little bit easier to set up that boundary because you know what the boundary will look like. Um, not that it's going to be more strict, but the boundary is more. It's got more fundament to it. It's more grounded within that actual expression of yourself. It's when you know this is a non-negotiable, it'll be so much easier to put up that boundary and let people know, like, hey, this is the only night that I have for myself, and this is what I need to be able to perform all the other days of the week. And therefore, I have decided that I'll prefer this over whatever it is that they were about. And when it's a preference, you know that it's like, hey, I kind of set this time aside for myself. I'm willing to, adjust. However, do know that I did have this time to protect myself. So if I'm gonna adjust myself, I'm kind of giving up on something, which I'm fine to do. I just wanted to communicate that. And therefore it's about that awareness of, yeah, where are you at? What is your value? And is it a preference or a non-negotiable?
Yes, and that kind of takes us to the segue of one of the other things that I was thinking about. You know, we talk about some one-off conversations where we're saying yes or no to things. However, one of the other really great tools that is helpful is when you can take an inventory from all of the areas of your life to see if you are showing up and being your authentic self. So you could take, in my career, in my authentic self, and in my health and fitness, am I in my authentic self? And you can rate those, and so real simple way is from like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Just kind of think of on a scale, I'm very authentic or I'm not authentic at all, and I'd like to be. And so, really, that's the question is, okay, if I'm not as authentic as I'd like to be, what would it take for me to do that? What do I need, and how can I do it?
Yeah, I agree with that. What would it look like?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that things like that, you know, taking that little time to sit with yourself and actually reflect on, okay, how am I showing up authentically? What would it even look like for me to be a 10 in that space? Maybe you're a 4. All right, what would it take to get to a 5? But what would it even look like to get to a 10? What is that? I think that a lot of people have never even asked themselves that question because I don't, yeah, like we said in the beginning, we started off saying that authenticity is one of the most underrated type of things. Like it's talked about a lot, but it's not really understood. And yeah, I think it's one of the best questions that you could ask yourself to live a life that is worry free. You know, it's I truly believe that the only reason that people are experiencing any type of problems in their lives is because they're not acting within authentic alignment of who they are. That's all that it's about, because life's just constantly mirroring back to you who you are. And yeah, I think that every time it's mirroring back to you something you don't like, that might be because you might be showing up as a version of yourself that you don't authentically prefer.
And then that's true. People will respond whether you're authentic to yourself or inauthentic to yourself. The universe is going to respond. And so you're right. Once you get those reflections back, you're feeling into your body, because a lot of us like to think that we're authentic, but then if we're not paying attention to our body, we're going to know real quickly when we're not. And just, being able to accept it, like to call it out as it is like, oh, when I did this one thing, I wasn't being authentic to my values, and that didn't feel good at all. Why am I doing this to myself? Okay, well, I'm doing this because blah blah blah. And then you turn it around like, okay, well, now that I know, and I know what I would like to have happen, what are the steps that I could take today, or what's one step I could take tomorrow that will get me closer to that? Because, a lot of times you can't just flip a switch and just say, I don't really like the way I showed up. I was really inauthentic. Okay, next time I'm going to be 100% authentic. It
Yeah,
doesn't work that way. It
yeah,
takes small incremental steps typically before you really arrive in that place. And I think that if you think that you're one and done to becoming authentic to who you are, you're going to be sadly disappointed, because this is a lifelong journey of being authentic. You're always going to be thrown curveballs, or your preferences could change over time. And so you're always going to be recalibrating and readjusting those preferences and your non-negotiables. But the key to this whole thing is not just being apathetic or being afraid of stepping forward and communicating. If you can communicate anything to anyone, no matter what, most of your problems go away. It's
mm,
the absence of saying something that your problems stay with you and everything else that you touch.
yeah, yeah. That's a funny thing of people pleasing, where um, a lot of people think that, you know, as people pleasers, what what we mostly see and or read in psychological texts or whatever is that when you're a people pleaser, that means you're conflict avoidant. You'll do everything you can to avoid conflict, which is true to a certain extent. But what's funny is that while you're avoiding conflict here between you and another person, what's actually happening is that you're bringing it inside and you're just taking the conflict within you. So, from a certain perspective, you're not actually conflict avoidant. You just don't want to, you know, show it in the external world, and you'll just have the conflict within you because apparently you're more comfortable with sitting with your own discomfort of you choosing not to be yourself over actually speaking about it and having the conflict in here. And well, the only way to solve that conflict, or the only way to get through it and to better your relationships or to come to a solution, is by bringing it out there instead of you just people pleasing and storing it all within you. I think that's just a funny thing to notice. And also, when you're aware of that, that you might have that tendency to people please, or when you might have that preference to store things up within yourself instead of bringing it out there, it's such a good awareness because, like you said, it's not about all changing it just like that, on the this is this constant journey. And when you know that I might be a little bit susceptible to people pleasing, that's where you can live with that extra awareness of it and maybe prevent it or maybe go through it in a different way than how you're used to. Um, I remind myself of it constantly.
Oh, and that's very good that you remind yourself of it constantly, because I mean, having the awareness means you can do something about it. And one of the biggest things that you can tell when you're in conflict with yourself because you're keeping it so inside is the moment you start becoming disappointed, resentful, all these other things that are going. It's like, well, how long do you want to be resentful for doing or not doing that thing? How long do you really want to be angry every time you have to do this said thing because you want to look good on the external uh validation line. So really, it all boils down to how authentic you are is going to really depend on, how uncomfortable or comfortable are you going to be to get to what you
Yeah,
say you want to be, which is to honor your values and to show up in the way that feels good to you in your body, and it doesn't require external validation to get that. You do it for
yeah,
you, and life is just better that way. I will tell people that you're lighter
definitely.
and more energized when you're in alignment. And again, that's all areas of your life. If you're not in alignment in one area of your life, chances are it's going to bleed into your other. So
Definitely.
paying attention to it, and being honest with yourself about, what needs to change, what needs to be present in order to shift that. And don't feel
Yeah,
bad about it, if you find you're in a space or a place where maybe you didn't quite show up the way you wanted to in an authentic way. Just use it as an awareness and a learning opportunity. And I always like to use this one phrase: when you know better, you do better.
exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. I like that. Um, Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. I don't know if you can tell, but I always love it and the depth of it, right? Because it's not talked about that much, especially not between people. Like we might do this inner work with ourselves, or we might watch these things online, but to actually have a conversation with someone about what it means to be authentic and how to show up like that, especially with a partner or a dear friend or someone that you have, a dear colleague, something like that. These types of conversations really increase the level of the relationship that you have when you're willing to have these conversations consciously, and when you're also willing to look at yourself and reflect and actually um, consciously improve on yourself.
And that just goes back to what we were talking about earlier about having these, safe places where we can have some truth-telling micro practices. So,
Yep.
and just, if you're going to be authentic with any person, whether it's your friend, your partner, your colleague, whatever, practice it. Just practice it all the time. And then when you catch, and you can even ask your person that you're practicing with, hey, can you like let me know if you, now that you know my values and what I want, if you see me like not like honoring myself and communicating these things, would you tell me? Would you
Right.
take the time to just call it out because I really want to grow? And so that's
I
one of
think
the
that's
most.
what coaches are for as well.
Yes,
A good
coaches,
coach will
mentors,
help you
guides.
exactly do that. Yeah.
And that there's one thing I would want to share with our audience as they're listening to us. We have only barely touched the surface on authenticity and the types of tools and the things that can get in the way of it. If you would like to reach out to Mick or I, we'd be happy to jump on a call to unpack it even more so because it's both our favorite topics. As you can tell, we're both excited about it. But what makes us even more excited is when we can get into conversations with individuals such as yourself, and we can help you where there's an area where you'd like to grow because we love to be that mirror. We love to be able to take you through step-by-step exercises. There's so many different ones. We tonight have mostly used different questions and prompts, but there's other things that are equally as helpful. And so, what better way to do that than to reach out to us? We'd love to have that opportunity.
Right. In fact, I actually created this, I think it's like 10, 15 pages. It's a free ebook I created that comes with the Authentic Alignment program. And it's these 15 pages that will explain everything about, what boundaries are and how to get in touch with your values and then the boundaries around that, and then how to actually implement that and how to start practicing it. So yeah, if anyone is listening is interested in that, either drop a comment or send me a message. I'd be happy to send that to you. It's absolutely free. And it's been this process. It always feels like the words don't really catch what I mean, but it is life changing. It actually is. Because, like you said, it seeps through every single area in your life. And the way you do one thing is how you do everything. And the moment that you start making that decision of, hey, I'm going to be showing up a little bit more authentic. I'm going to make a little bit more aligned actions today. That's going to have a massive effect on the way that you do life. And yeah, I think that's interesting. Thanks, thanks, Linda, for this conversation. Was there anything you wanted to add?
What I wanted to add is that next week we won't be doing our typical live around this day and time because Mick and I are going to be involved in a special event for International Men's Day, and it'll be on November 16th at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we're going to be celebrating men and boys, and we've got several speakers lined up, several different topics, and I will share from this recording of the live in the notes, how you can come and join us. We will be recording live. We'd love to have you. And so after that event is done, then Mick and I will decide on the day and time for our next live. And again, do share with us what you'd like us to speak to because we love to be able to bring that to you and to
Yeah.
provide value in a way that you love.
No, I like that. I love that we had that comment from last week where it was about we need some tools about this. Like, yeah, that's the most um flowy way, of getting the conversation going. And I think that these whole live series is this sort of never-ending conversation between us that we just, go from topic to topic. And yeah, I like these coming togethers. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Let us know if you want to have some one-on-one time with us. Send us a message or share below what you'd like us to talk next time. And we hope to see you at the men's event. That'd be awesome.
Yes, thank you. And have a good evening or a good morning wherever you are.